Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Juliana Marulanda about effectively measuring and sustaining team performance.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a chance to have a conversation with you today about performance management, team management, and we're really going to be talking about what it is about people management that sometimes managers, get uptight about, why they don't like it, some of the problems that might emerge. But then, how can we effectively measure and sustain higher levels of team performance? Because I think that's really what every organization wants. That's what every leader wants. That's what every team member wants, is they want to be in a high performing organization and a high performing team. And there's lots of things we can do to make that happen. And there's lots of things we can avoid to make that run more smoothly. As we get started today, I wanted to share Juliana's bio with everybody. Juliana Marulanda is a business operations expert, speaker, and the founder of Scale Time. With over 18 years of experience across Wall Street, the nonprofit sector, technology startups, and family-owned businesses, she has now served over 200 plus digital agencies. Featured on Forbes and Entrepreneur, she helps up-level businesses into lean, mean, profitable machines. On average, Juliana and her team create ways to free up at least 40 hours per week for her clients so they can have successful agencies that run without them. That's awesome. I love the operations and the process focus. And as we were talking about in the pre-interview, so much of the problems that come from people management often come, in part at least, and get exacerbated because of poor processes that just disrupt things and make things much harder than they need to be. So I'm excited for the discussion today. Anything else you want to share by way of background with the listeners?
Yeah, just to say that, especially like if you're an owner or if you're recently put into a management position that you've never been. Like, I think my first management position was when I was 23, and I looked like I was 12, so that did not help my credibility. and I was managing like 52 people at a time, and I remember the level of distress of like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea. Like, it was scary. It was crazy. And for me, what I had found, right, like my whole MO was, if I can, hire better and train faster, then I can manage less. And that's really where, my personal philosophy with systems and processes is that they really help to take a lot of the burden of management off your plate so that you can focus on performance as opposed to like the people issues. Will the people issues always arise? Yes, of course, because, we're human. But you can really tackle a lot of the management by allowing your systems and processes to take care of that, so that you can focus less on sort of what I call like the drama of things or the politicking of things, or, the emotions of things, right? Because a lot of the I don't want to deal with this comes from the fact that, it's difficult conversations, there's conflict, all of that. But with good systems and processes, I feel like we could tackle almost 80% of that.
Yeah. I think a lot of that can be taken care of. And when I just think about the problems that arise due to poor processes, the frustrations, the anxieties, the stress, the miscommunications, that can end up impacting workplace relationships. They can end up impacting performance. And so, when I think about the conversations that have to happen around performance, or issues within a team, often there's some sort of process component to it, that if we can just have better processes in place, then we can not only can we be more efficient, but we can actually reduce the number of friction points, that produce the problems that people tend to have, as imperfect people are butting up against each other within a workplace, and inevitably things happen, and people get frustrated, they get annoyed, they say things, they do things they shouldn't, and then you have to deal with it as a manager. So so make processes better, and you erase not all, but a lot of those types of things. And especially if you demonstrate to your team that you're constantly trying to improve processes, make things more streamlined, make things more efficient, you're demonstrating to them that you value their time, that you're not trying to waste their time, that you don't want them to be doing busy work. You're trying to take as much of that off their table as possible, and they will appreciate it.
Absolutely. And there's a stat, I think it might be I don't know if the stat has been revised. I know the stat was true like 5 years ago, but it was most people who are going to quit within the first year quit within the first 3 months, right? And a lot of times people think it's due to, people quit because of money, right? Like money is a huge deal, but it's usually factors around, reinforcement, positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, feedback, recognition, visibility, knowing that you're part of a team, knowing that there's opportunities for growth. And if your processes don't allow to have these things visible, right? And then, your employees and or contractors are living in obscurity. There's just so much uncertainty in the world right now. I mean, as there always is, sometimes more than others, but if there's obscurity over what their role is or what their job is or what their workload is, it just doesn't give them the warm and fuzzies to want to stay in an organization where they can grow, right? And so creating processes that make performance visible, and I'll get into the practicalities of how do we do that tactically, but, getting really visible. So not only do managers know what's going on, but employees themselves know how they're doing. Then that way they can truly self-select into an environment and a culture that is about performance.
Yeah, that's great. And I think as we continue the discussion today, like you said, we'll get more into the tactical elements of how we might approach that. Another thing that I wanted to talk about first is really this issue of managing by putting out fires. It seems like a lot of leaders kind of spend most of their time running around like chickens with their heads cut off, just putting out fires. And I get it. Like if something urgent happens, then you need to respond to it, right? And you need to take care of your customers. You need to take care of your people. If there's a problem, you need to address it. But I think if you're one of those that find yourself basically spending 80% of your time every day or more putting out fires, I think you might want to rethink the way you're approaching your leadership of your team, and what types of systems and processes are in place or not in place that could help reduce the fire mentality, and actually allow you to spend more time doing the work of people management, more time doing the strategic work, more time, reflecting on your team and how things can be improved. What are your thoughts about that, and how we can improve that within an organization and a team?
I actually have an exercise for my clients called the fire extinguisher. And the reason why is because so many of them are in a reactive standpoint as opposed to a proactive standpoint. And sometimes there's just a lack of awareness of things that are happening repeatedly, right? Because you can be so in the weeds on things, right? And so like, it feels like things are coming at you, almost like they're attacking you during the day. Like, oh crap, a client, we've got a client fire, we've got a team fire, we've got, a thing like, something won't launch. Oh my God. Like, now we've got to call, whatever, vendor application, whatnot. So the thing is like fires are going to happen no matter what. right? But when we start to see something happen more than once, then it's our job to be proactive about it, right? So it's our job to say, okay, how do we diminish the impact of this in the future? And I'm the type of person, like, if it happens once, I'm like, I'm never dealing with this again. I'm like, that's it. Like, something's happening, someone else is dealing with it, like, and so in this exercise, I say, okay, like, what's the thing that actually happened, right? Because especially when there's fire, sometimes we get very emotional about it, right? Like, especially like if it's a client or something, we'd be like, ah, right? This is like, what actually happened? What was the request? What was, and sometimes it can be a repeatable thing. I deal with a lot with digital marketers, and it's a very common fire per se, but that actually isn't really a big fire. Is like, a client's credit card doesn't work anymore, right? So they can't continue their advertising, which is like not actually that big of a deal, right? Because how do you deal with that? Or proactively, it's like, okay, you get a second credit card on file. Right? Like, so we make sure that we do that, like we feedback loop that into the client onboarding. So, so one of the things, like, what's the thing that actually happened, and then who can deal with it, right? Who can be responsible for it, so it's not the owner. And then what's necessary to make that person responsible for it, right? Like, is there training, is there instructions, like what do we need to do in order to empower that individual to be able to take care of that? And then what are the communications that need to go out? Because usually with fires, there's some sort of initial communication, whether it's an email, a phone call, to the person or to something else, right? So a third party that's affecting the thing that's happening. So, what's the communication that needs to happen? And and for as much as you possibly can, how can we template that communication, if at all possible, right? So not to the point where it's like robotic, but to the point of like, okay, that way I know that whoever's empowered to do this is going to do it in a way that I would do it anyway, right? And so we have, issues that are escalated, and then, issues that sometimes there's things that don't get escalated that should, which then, become almost like mini fires. I've had clients come to me where they're like, oh man, my team isn't picking up on signals where clients actually want to be spending more, right? Clients actually want more services, or they want more upsells, or they, and these things should be escalated to either an account manager or to the founder or to a salesperson, and they're not, right? So how do we then look for trigger words around things that should be escalated? Because there's two sides of that pendulum. One where you're losing money because you're being super reactive. And then other times you're also losing money because people don't know how to pick up the signals to react.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I love having an activity where you can actually train people on putting out the fire extinguisher. That's awesome. And I think it's a mindset shift largely. You just have a mindset shift about how you're going to proactively address the types of challenges that might come about. And I love how you mentioned the feedback loops. And obviously there's things that emerge that we can't plan for, that, like you go back in time 6 months, there weren't many people thinking that COVID was going to completely disrupt everything the way it did. And so, that's a big fire. It pops up. You have to deal with it. It kind of transforms a lot of things. But those types of things are much more rare. The type of like a credit card being declined because it's expired. That's not a big deal. Like those are the types of things that just happen all the time. And so you can plan for it. And the list could go on and on and on and on. And so, yeah, there's no reason why we need to expend so much of our bandwidth over those types of issues, I think, which then frees up time for us to focus on other people management issues. And I know one of the things you focus a lot on in your work is about the measuring of team performance. And I like to think about that in terms of sustainability too, because I think a lot of times we're too short-term oriented, and we think, I want to increase my team performance this quarter, and so these are the metrics, these are the KPIs, and we're going to measure that, and we're going to see movement. And that's great. Let's measure things, let's understand where things are going. But short-term progress, while good, if it's done at the expense of long-term sustainability, that's bad. So we have to have a combination approach in how we think about things. So tell me, what are your thoughts in terms of measurement of performance and how we can do that effectively, and also how we connect that with the sustainability piece?
Yeah, absolutely. There's sustainability, and then there's also capability, right? Because depending on who we have doing the things, right? Depending on how we're measuring, we might have people on the team that are that have tons of capability. Or you might have someone who's super green, or you might have someone that you're training from scratch, right? And so given those things, there's going to be different types of metrics for their individual performance. Now I'm going to put that sentence to the side for a second and then kind of couch this as a lot of the times when people are thinking about KPIs, right, or individual or OKRs or whatever you subscribe to, I like to think about it as in almost like a triangular format, right? Like at the very top is your business. What is it that you're trying to do for the business? Are you in acquisition mode, right? Like, are you basically trying to get as many clients as possible? Or do you have your marketing channel set and now you're really trying to retain clients? Are you in a massive hiring spree and, you're growing very, very quickly? So we need to figure out, okay, how do we maintain culture and sustainability during this part, right? So thinking about where are you in the maturity of your business? What are the goals of the business? And that will really influence and impact the rest of the individual performance, right? Because if you're not hiring, right, there's probably not going to be any real hiring KPIs or anything like around talent. They might be performance of your current team, but we don't have any sort of growth things right now. So I'm just kind of really thinking about it, because sometimes the discussion around metrics can get very hairy. And I think it's really about first distinguishing what do you want the business to do in the next year, right? And then breaking that down by quarter. And knowing that, I often say that business years almost happen like dog years because things change so quickly. So 20 years ago, you might be like, okay, we've got our business plan and then we're going to match this for the next, 10 years exactly as it is. And nowadays you really have to review things almost, monthly, if not weekly. So having that in mind, and let's just say, okay, we really want to, we want revenue growth right now. And we can probably have a team of X amount for a little bit, right? Let's say for this year, we're probably not going to do any massive hiring. We've got a team. Okay, cool. So then what are the team members doing? In terms of what are they delivering and what type of team members that you have, right? So you might have salespeople, you've got, people doing some sort of production or delivering your product or service. You may or may not have, a few people who are doing management, right? And so how is everyone contributing to the overall business goals? Because I think where people get into busy work, is where there's a lack of alignment between what the business is doing and what people are doing. Right. And sometimes that, sometimes that could be attributed to like founderitis. And founders are like, ooh, here's a shiny new thing and we're going to go after this thing, but it has nothing to do with our goals. Because sometimes that happens. And so really having a place to check new initiatives, right? I often like to tell my clients to create a change board in their project management system. So if there are new initiatives, the team can see, okay, are these initiatives really going to be able to affect our overall business goals, right? So we've got a little bit of a check and balance, because sometimes the founders and the owners are like the worst offenders of not having, clear alignment between the business goals and what everyone's doing, right? Like everyone's kind of like going on their way and they got their workflows, and then the client's like, I'm gonna pull resources to this thing that has nothing to do with anything. And my clients often laugh.
I see that happen so often. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons why that does occur, but the shiny objectitis, or whatever you termed it, like it's a common thing, and so we have to assure alignment in purpose and activities with the mission of the organization at all levels, and that includes the CEO, that includes the board.
Oh my
because
God,
sometimes
everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so we have a place to kind of put all those initiatives and really check them, like, and prioritize them. Do we have the resources to do this? Do we have the money? Is the ROI there? Are we aligned with our goals for the quarter and the year? Because sometimes it can be just totally off the rails, and sometimes it's a great thing that is aligned. Okay, we're going to make space for this in everybody's workflow, but we're not going to burn people out for something that is like a vanity project. So right,
Yeah.
so I say that just in alignment because there's a huge hiccup in that alignment between the business goals and the people's individual performance goals, which affect their workflow. So then when we're taking a look at people's individuals performance goals, the idea of having some sort of and I really like quarterly sort of progress where we're able to track performance evaluations, for lack of a better term, right? People will then make it fun and make it happier, and it's like the performance happy hour, or however you want to make it, so it doesn't feel as like corporate-y or infringement. But what's cool is that if you have a performance sort of track where the employee and the employers, right, and or managers or whoever buy into together, right? I've seen that sort of collaboration be really amazing. Because it's like, hey, what do you want to work on? Hey, what do I think you need to work on, both quantitative and qualitatively? What are the targets that we're going to hit? What are the strategies that we're going to use to hit those targets? This is what we've got in place, and then let's check in. Then we have either monthly check-ins with the individual, and then maybe we even, especially for smaller teams, have scorecards that are more weekly, that are metrics based to hit those targets of those performance evals that are feeding into your overall business goals. Then the person feels like, one, they have a plan, two, they're on track. They can self-correct when they're not hitting targets, so you don't have to manage as much. We have information flow and data going up instead of down. And what I mean by that is that the employee is like putting stuff into a scorecard. They're making sure that they're like, okay, I have X amount of projects to complete, or I've got X amount of targets to do. How am I doing? And if they're not doing well, then they have options, right? Like they can ask for help. They can, lean on their colleagues. They can figure something out in terms of getting them the capabilities that they need to hit those targets. And they can self-evaluate. So there isn't this muckiness of like, I don't know what's going on, right? Because everything's super transparent. And now we've got feedback loops. And if you're doing this on a quarterly basis, then you can really check, okay, how are my people performing? And then how are my overall business goals performing? Are we in alignment? And sometimes it's like, oh crap, these performance goals were not great. Like it happens, right? And so you can adjust, and you're not waiting an entire year to, one, figure out how people are doing, and two, figure out even what people are doing. So that way we can create visibility. And then you've got your weekly meetings, whether, all sorts of things, right? Whether they're stand-ups or scrums or just, team meetings, where we can troubleshoot to make sure that everyone's meeting their goals.
Yeah. You raised some really important points there and gave some really good tips and advice. I completely agree with what you said. And I we could go on and on with this because this is a really important topic. There's a lot of depth here. Unfortunately, we're about out of time. So perhaps I can have you back on soon so we can continue the discussion. But before we leave today, I just wanted to give you the last word, give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about what you and your business are doing and what you can do for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to Scale Time, you can sign up for a newsletter. We do tons of conversations around, different types of processes, everything from sales process to client onboarding to project management, to, hiring and team onboarding and training. We oftentimes, we'll have like, tech hacks and tips and tools and ways to do things where you feel like you have no time to do anything. We find ways to make things really, really efficient. So newsletter is a great way to kind of keep connected. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Juliana Marulanda, and I'd love to share with you guys a project management checklist. And I think when it comes to, as I mentioned, project management, I often think of it as the culmination of so much of what gets mucky when it comes to people management. Because if we've got good visibility, if we've got visibility into people's workflows, into what they're doing, into how they're doing it, into who's doing what and how much, then the transparency is really, really, really good. And it's one of those things that really allows businesses to scale. So I will send that off to you. It's a bit.ly link. Project management is short, checklist, MGMT. And I wish you all good luck in your scaling and managing. And I'm definitely here for anyone who wants to think about, okay, how do we get the business to the next level? And how do we utilize systems, processes, and performance to do that?
Wonderful. Juliana, it has been a real pleasure talking with you today. I hope we can do this again soon. I'll put that bit.ly link in the show notes so listeners can access it really easily. And I hope that that listeners will reach out to Juliana, get connected on LinkedIn, find out more about what she can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone continues to stay healthy and safe. I hope everyone can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope we all have a great week. Thank you.
We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.